Welcome everybody. I hope you can just turn on my video. Welcome to the second of the two webinars I run. This session is all about mobilizing digital transformation and about gaining momentum in engaging digital technologies in your organization. At the last session, we talked about the frameworks and the success criteria or critical success factors in delivering successful digital transformation into your organization. And that's what we'll focus on today. So a couple of admin points. I know that many of you use chat to say hello, etc., and to chat about, perhaps ask questions of the panelists, but I'm not able to see the chat during the session. So what I would ask is that you, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A section specifically, and then when I get to the end of the slides, I can come back and look at that. Finally, at the end, we have the ability to ask questions, so both those ones you posted, but any that are live. If you wouldn't mind, during the after the event, the panelists will post a survey about this session. Be good to get your feedback and your thoughts. Always very, very useful. So let's go on. So what are we going to talk about today? So we'll do a quick recap on what is digital, why it's happening now, talk about the digital evolution curve and the stages of the curve. We'll talk just recap a little bit on that balance of strategy versus execution, then we'll get stuck into the 9 critical success factors for successful digitally led change. And we'll talk about the balance of how you effectively execute in change across your organization. So firstly, recap, what's digital? And digital is, it's actually, when we talk about digital, we're not talking just about the technology, we're actually talking about the market and behavioral change caused by the adoption of technology. So it's how we are different. Technology itself doesn't do things, it's how we use it that changes. So when we talk about digital transformation, we're talking about that adaptation to that change in humans, and it's how humans have changed. So it's happening at scale and pace across customers, businesses, partners, competitors, and personnel. We're all humans. We're all using these digital tools, the mobile phone being the most powerful in terms of its behavioral influence, and of course laptops. The very fact I'm having this webinar with you from London and you're all around the world is proof that this is a digital disruption. It's changed the way that people engage with each other. It's shrinking the world, which is means that I think differently about how I'm going to engage with my colleagues or my customers. So the requirement for digitally led transformation, this organizational change, is because you need to react to that, fend off disruption or remain competitive. And that goes across the whole field, not just in the operation, but in terms of remaining competitive in your hiring, in your talent acquisition and retaining staff. That's a competitive environment these days. There is a huge digital skills shortfall globally. So, adapting, engaging and doing things correctly will attract people to come to you. So we talked about digital transformation being the behavioral shift, but technology about what you change is only a part of that, because ultimately it's how we use it, right? That's mindsets, but it's also the technology can change your business and operational models about how you make money. So it's not just about using technology. So what you're not trying to do is use technology to digitize what you do today. What you need to challenge is what is the outcome I'm looking for, and how can technology help me? So that may be a fundamental change to the way that you deliver to a customer. Technology is only one small part. So why is it happening now? We talked last time about this sort of acceleration of the pace of change of commerce. So, 1950 to 1900 to 1950, nothing really changed. 1950 to 1990, it's only 40 years. It started to be about distribution. But again, technology wasn't technology was moving people and goods, but it wasn't moving conversations. It wasn't shrinking down the cycle of space. Things were still happening at the same time. Things started to really change 30 years ago when the rise of the internet, Amazon started. We started to have a data set around commerce, understanding what was being bought by who. And of course, since 2000, that's accelerated because of this interconnected world of social media, of us being hyper-connected humans, being able to make influences from all over the world, from each other, and the influences is the biggest part. Is that my decision making in terms of trade is influenced by so many more factors now than it was previously. Previously, I had just one or two recommendations was enough, but now I need to verify what sort of business they are. Are they ecologically friendly? There's all sorts of influences that I may choose to influence my trade. And now, so therefore the control, because I have so much data available to me, is now much more in mine as the buyer. I am more in charge. So this push, which is the manufacturer and the distributor was pushing, then becomes a pull mechanism. I choose. And I decide who I'm going to buy from based on good customer experience and then the data that is available to me. So summarizing, this market presents opportunities, huge growth from digitally led. So because there are a lot of businesses out there, half of businesses don't have this capability. So you can steal from them if you're your competitors. You can take their business from them. Great disruption, great competitive advantage. Fundamental changes in customer experience, improvements. We'll talk a little bit about the customer experience being central in the world of digital transformation. Operational and go-to-market efficiency. So we're able to do things quicker, more efficiently using technology. And of course, business models can fundamentally change. And we talked last time about the music industry being a fantastic example of how technology fundamentally changed the way that the music industry operates. All of this means top line growth and bottom line growth, competitive prevention, immunity from disruption. So we talked last time about mapping where we as an organization are and characterizing the organization into a state or a stage, sorry. Whereas where does their marketing, are they mature in the way that they digitally market? So that's stage one, about this bolted on mechanic. I've created my interface to the world from a digital capability. I'm marketing online, I've got apps, I've got supplier connections that help me understand my supply mechanism, but it's everything to the outside world, and that gives me reach and it gives me revenue. It means I can go a lot further and I can go bigger for a smaller amount of money. I'm not building shops or stores or shipping physical goods. Perhaps I am shipping, but I'm shipping them from central locations. That digital transformation is that outer ring. Front end multi-channel is the term we use. And then secondly is where you start to digitize the internal mechanics, which includes how your staff book a holiday, but also includes how do you manufacture, create what it is you do. How flexible is that? How adaptive is that to what's being demanded? Can you be bespoke for every customer to a degree? Can you customize? And this is where digital gets embedded into your organization. Sometimes called the hard yards of digital transformation, especially for established businesses, because they're having to re-engineer a lot of technology internally from old legacy systems that are about automated processes to something that is innovative and adaptive and linked to the digital demand that's coming from the stage one activity. And then finally, when you've done that, you become a stage three, which is where you're able to market and deliver innovatively, because your digital platforms are integrated and you're data-led, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the stages. Not to say you can't be doing stage 1, 2, and 3 at the same time in different parts of your organization. In fact, often businesses do. Also, some businesses decide to just ignore stage 1 and 2 and go straight to stage 3 and launch a challenger brand under their own control. Therefore, moving their customers to a more profitable platform that they control themselves. So there's lots of different ways, and the reason people would use those would be based on their risk and the immediacy of the requirement. So if a business is struggling because of competition that's all digital, they have little choice but to embrace that digital and jump to be creating something stage 3 rather than taking the time and effort to re-engineer their businesses through stage 1 and 2. So those tactics of how you change in terms of what pace, the risk appetite, the cost, the duration are absolutely down to the business itself and the environment it sits in. I'm often asked the question, how long does digital transformation take? Well, actually, it's in your control. It can take a short amount of time with high risk and high cost, or it can take a long time with low risk and probably high cost. And there's always a sweet spot in the middle that the organization feels comfortable with. That's not necessarily to say the sweet spot is the optimal, because the organizations have different risk profiles. People are people. Some people, organizations, some industries like more risk and can cope with more risk because things turn over quicker. Perhaps they've got bigger cash reserves and so on. But ultimately, the change is the inevitable. You have to embrace it. The question is how long it takes you is about how your appetite to get to the end state. In some cases, people move too slowly and they'll miss the boat. We see this all the time. Organizations, retail is a classic industry that is not evolved fast enough into the digital arena, especially in Europe. We're now seeing the demise of a lot of retail brands, whereas banking took a long time in Europe to get into this space, and now we have several big startups that are going out there and disrupting, and even some of the big banks are disrupting themselves. So I think things are picking up pace in that respect. If you look at B2B sectors, now we're starting to see an innovation in supply and in manufacturing. 3D printers is a fantastic example of being able to create something very quickly in a digitally automated way. In fact, I saw today that there was a boat manufactured in the US for use with the American Special Forces, and it now has several records because it's the biggest single object, except for a house, that was printed in plastic. So this is the new type of manufacturing process that we may see, and of course, digital's been embedded in the automotive industry for a very long time, because there are now hundreds of different versions of the VW Audi Group platform, all based on one set of infrastructure, and customization is done electronically rather than the humans involved. So remembering the balance of execution, sorry, excuse me 1 second. So last time we talked about the balance of strategy and execution within an organization. And we talked about being strategically very strong and being able to execute effectively. And if you balance those, then you end up having a great customer experience because you're strategically and executively strong. You have great retention and attraction of staff. Innovation, you're able to, because you're strategically very clear about where you're going, but you're executing in an agile way. And of course, that leads to competitive advantage. So the fact is that digitally advanced companies, even this is a few years old, but it stands true today, are significantly more profitable than their counterparts and their competitors. So we've done the recap. I'm keen to let the rubber hit the road in terms of, right, okay, how do I mobilize this? Well, I gave you a glimpse of this last time. And we talked about this 9 critical success factors, the strategic success factors. What do I need to do, have embedded in my organization strategically? How does my DNA need to exist to set myself up for success? And then execution-wise, what are the practices that I need to operate in my organization to make sure that I am adaptable, I am flexible, I am making sure that whatever I do has the best chance of success on a day-to-day basis. So remember, the balance between strategic and execution is key. You have to be very good and strong on both. So, and the kingpin to all of this is having a really clear picture and strategy, objective, and target about what you're trying to achieve. Now, that might sound like, okay, well, of course you need to have a plan. I'm not talking about a plan. I'm talking about a projection of what your organization will look like and how it will operate, and then strategy is how you get there. So the vision is the end game. The strategy is how you will get there. Your objectives are all the things that you will achieve along the way, and the targets are the quantum of those objectives. Are they bigger, smaller than expected? So it's really keen in this fast-pacing environment to be very clear about what it is you're trying to achieve. And often, because of the cycle of strategic change that we were talking about in commerce, it could be 20 years for a strategy to have to change. You know, if I have the vision 20 years forward, you know, I would be making a lot of money, right? So, but things moved at a slower pace. So historically, you were able to see indicators coming much further out and then adapt to them before they got to you. Environmental and geopolitical issues aside, I can see the demand for, you know, I could see the wane in demand for horses and the growth in cars, because that happened over a long period of time. But in our cycle, that happens so much quicker now. We see that, you know, there are fickle things like the demise of Friends Reunited or the demise of MySpace. These things fell off a cliff very, very quickly, relatively speaking. And of course, Facebook is grown and continues to grow over as little as 10 years to be one of the largest, if not the largest, connected electronically connected business in the world. So if we think about the pace of things that are happening, when I'm talking about a vision, I'm talking about how my business will operate in 3 years' time, and how trends are influencing that, which isn't insurmountable. And the strategy is how I'm going to get there, the objectives are what I want to achieve, and the targets are the quantum. So it's really important to spend the time focusing on that. And we'll talk about an example shortly in a business that didn't. The other strategic factors are more structural in nature. So the first thing is as we've established, digital is about humans. And humans operate in every part of the business, and their embracing of that technology, especially the mobile phone, means that every department in the business needs to have a digital aspect to it. So HR needs to think about booking holidays through an app, rather than asking people to fill up bits of paper. Finance needs to think about how my numbers going to be, am I going to be able to cycle my reporting and my P&L and my balance sheet to keep up with what's happening in the front end, which is changing every 5 minutes? Where's that technology going to deliver? Where can I deliver my treasury? What about my liquidity, etc.? If you think about cash flows, think about the finance department. He needs to react at the same pace as everything else in the business. So he needs to own his part of the digital strategy and the operations and so on and so on. So digital is not a part of the CTO's job or the CIO's job. If anybody's responsible for being a chief digital officer, it's the CEO, because he needs to embed this digital technology in his entire organization, and he needs to mandate that everybody's responsible for digital. So digital is part of the executive team, everyone. Customer experience. We talked about our expectations as customers and the way that we engage with technology as being a shifting, because we use it every day. So we are the customer, therefore focus on the customer. That everything we're doing in digital needs to reflect on how are they perceiving it, how are they engaging it. And the concept of a user relates to how your employees engage with technology. So thinking about, well, the example, booking some leave. I want to do that on my app. I don't want to do that on a piece of paper with somebody signing it. I just want it to go in and my manager to say, yes, approved. That's a user thoughtful, user experience led in the business. The right organizational environment and empowerment is an element that captures a lot of the sins of digital transformation projects. But what this is talking about is incentivizing in the right way, making digital change, or the program that you're trying to deliver, part of everyone's daily task, making sure that they're living and breathing this. And the reason for that is that that's how it's going to be. If you think about technologies, they don't stand still. We're not going to put a billing system in and then forget about it. It's a system that goes in and then it continually changes. So the environment needs to not be about a pace of change, then stop. It needs to be about continual change. So change needs to be impacted on everyone's scorecard. Make sure your organizational structure doesn't silo people in certain areas. But again, we're thinking about the customer experience. Don't put them into marketing, sales, acquisition, retention per se, although those are functional elements of a customer journey. But think about them from the other perspective, saying, well, is this customer a high value customer, a medium value customer? Well, what are we doing for them in each of these areas? So your focus, your organization is structured in a way that focuses you on the customer experience. And the final thing is about understanding the impact of what you're doing on the organization and empowering them. So if change is happening all the time, your organization wants to be part of it. The most successful changes delivered in programs generally are the one where lots of people are involved and know what's going on. Communication, we'll come on to that later. But that environment needs to exist. You can't have things done in secret and then delivered into the business. Sometimes you can do that from a commercial perspective, but it needs to be very impactful and very, very positive. So, I've worked with some businesses that have built propositions in secret to launch them because they're so disruptive on the market. And as a consequence, they're received well by the organization. But this is an area that is bespoke to you as an organization. Fundamentally, the golden rule here is if you see a barrier to change, that's what it would fall into. It's not that right organizational environment. So the executional factors, and by the way, I will give you evidence, examples shortly of where this can go well or go badly, each of these success factors. The executional ones are a bit more straightforward. I need a technical and data architecture plan to deliver on the vision. I need a plan for technology to be delivered. I need a solid CTO or CIO to help me deliver that, and he needs to be engaging with all of those executive leaders as to define what it is strategically they're trying to achieve. The data part is important because you need to say to yourself, what in that vision, what is the data I need to inform that organization of the future? So what in data do I need to create? That's the technical piece. Again, it's an executional aspect for me. Making the right level of investment. This comes back to a little bit down to risk. So if you are risk averse, you can afford to invest less each year and change slowly. If you have a high risk appetite, you can throw money at the problem and be very, very quickly. But you have to make the right investment for you as an organization and how making the vision achievable. So similarly, if you said, I want this done in 2 years, but then you didn't augment the team, give them extra capacity to cope with the extra work, then you're not making the right level of investment, because people are trying to do their day job and then they're trying to change everything at the same time. So this is a real balance. It's about making sure that the money to feed this vision and deliver it is available at the right time. Communications plan, I think it's in line with the customer experience, in line with the vision, because that's what you're delivering. Your vision is delivering a customer experience that delivers is communicated by that plan, and it brings that vision to life. It's a critical part. I understand people's concerns about confidentiality, but reality is that in your organization, it's far more important to be communicate what you're doing than it is to be worried about your competitors. Planning centrally, measuring change centrally. Well, if you're doing all of this around a common focus on experience and a common vision, then it makes sense to make it a common plan and communications. Therefore, you can see everything in one place because you're focused on the customer and the user again. And then finally, cross-functional working. And for me, this is possibly the most important working practice to execute effectively for change. If we think about the customer experience, if you're not touching the customer as part of a process, you're supporting it, the handling of the customer. So if you're in sales support, you might not be in sales, so you're not engaging with the customer, but you're in sales support. It still means that you have a voice at the creation process of creating that fantastic customer experience. So you need to work cross-functionally. You can't just digitize sales and then digitize marketing or digital. You can't do them in silos. They need to be sewn together. So the cross-functional working, that creation process is absolutely critical to make sure that what you're delivering is actually delivering on the vision. And if you do it in silos, you end up with gaps, and the customers fall into gaps, and then they're lost. So I'm going to rattle through these now just to give you an examples of good and bad. Vision. So what does it include? It's a customer, employee, and company viewpoint. So you're looking at it saying, for our customers, we'll do this, for our employees, we'll do this, and for our company, we'll do this is what our company will do. Laser focused objectives, really, really clear about what it is we want to achieve. A clarity on how it will be done. So your vision needs to include your risk appetite. What are we going to do this really? Are we gung ho, or are we going to say, you know what, we're going to do it over 5 years, and we know the risk is behind that. But a vision is very clear about your appetite. What happens when you don't do this? So a large UK high street retailer, very focused on change, lots of investments going into technology, keeping up with the compliance environment, huge amount of change going on, no clear strategy, no clear vision of what it is, the type of business that we were trying to, they were actually trying to turn the business around, but even what they were trying to turn it back around to what? That vision wasn't clear. So priorities were in constant shift. And it just, everything slowed down to a halt, because you 1 minute you're going left and the next minute you're going right, and so on. It's crippling if you don't have a really clear vision, because you're just wasting and you're making it up as you go along. Executive ownership, we talked about it. A chief digital officer can be a role in this environment that is a catalyst towards engaging digital in all of the organizations, engaging with each department to bring them up to speed. But ultimately, it is that. It's a temporary fix. And for you to be successfully, it shouldn't sit with an individual. Digital responsibilities should sit with the C-suite in general. An example of a business that didn't do this properly is a very large FMCG business in Europe. It's a client of ours, actually, and they had 60 brands over 100 countries, huge ambition to integrate all of their digital platforms, all of these agencies, etc. You know, you can imagine all of those brands and countries were managing their digital assets differently. So there was a huge opportunity to consolidate that into a common technical architecture, a common process, etc. But their digital director was sitting 2 layers below the board. So they had no influence. They were trying to effectively change the organization within, and that's just not going to happen. And the only way you can change something from within is to be a negative force, rather than a positive. I mean, virus changes things from within, and that's a bad thing to think about. Digital needs to be a positive change, because as soon as you know, even with viruses, you have resistance from the body that slows it down. So you know, imagine trying to do something good from the whole organization. It can take a very, very long time. So that person just didn't have the authority. The board hadn't bought into the mandate enough. They wanted the outcome, they just didn't understand what it needed to achieve it, because they didn't have the right level of ownership. Customer experience led. So if we think about all of the functions of an organization, the diagram on the left here looks at, you know, we've got a customer proposition at the center, which is customer experience, whether it be on the phone, you've got data and analytics about that experience, you've got product, you've got technology systems, etc. All of those should be focusing on that customer proposition. And then the operation of that sits in the employee experience, the tools, the training, the empowerment to deliver the customer proposition. So there was a benefit. It is a case of a business that did do this and then surpassed what is commonly referred to. And everybody looks at this and says, oh, Apple, yeah, they're great at customer proposition. Actually, the case isn't Apple, it's Samsung. So they used to be the form of, you know, Samsung used to be known for making simple devices that were great products. Apple did the same, but as soon as Apple came along, they took it to the next level with an ecosystem. They started with their phone, and then they had iTunes, and then they had other things that they added on. Whereas Samsung were behind in all that, didn't have an ecosystem, that didn't have those structures. Now, largely in Europe, Samsung is still behind Apple in terms of its ecosystem. But if you go into other countries in the world, Samsung have now surpassed Apple in a huge way, and they've learned from that. They've focused on this customer proposition, and the employee experience is significantly better over the top. A final one I'll just point out is the head of digital in Selfridges. When they launched their online capability, so for those that don't know, Selfridges is a very large department store in London, but UK as well, sorry, up in other cities. And they launched a subset of their website on the subset of their catalog, their store catalog, on the website. And what instantly happened is people went to store, they couldn't find the size of coat that they were looking for, they went to the website, it wasn't there. So you created a misalignment in customer experience. they had this fantastic availability, experience in store, and then there's a poorer experience online. So it wasn't consistent. It wasn't thinking about the customer. It was thinking about what they thought might be a good idea. Right organization environment. Well, we talked about this one, but this is about setting yourself up for success, get the right values, skills, accommodating the extra cost that change will bring, etc., etc. An example of a business that didn't do this was as a multi-carrier, e-commerce multi-carrier shipping. So they provided multiple routes for people to ship goods from their website, multiple capabilities. They created a digital capability for interface with all these shipping streams, but not beyond the core team. So when it came to adopting into the platform, well, what's this? I don't know anything about it. So this resistance to change, it needed to be included. The environment was segregated. It was done in secret, and therefore, when it arrived on the ground, it was a complete failure. It didn't work. They weren't focused on the team that were delivering it. It wasn't conscious of customer experience. It was done in a vacuum. So those are the strategic factors: vision and strategy and objectives and targets, ownership of digital across the executive, focus on customer experience, and then removing barriers to change is essentially don't set yourself up for an environment. It's got to be collaborative. Don't put things in the way. Don't disincentivize people to deliver something. Rather, empower them to deliver it, but make sure that they're very clear about what it is they're doing. So in the executional, these are slightly out of order, but I like to do them in this way. Cross-functional working. This is about being customer experience developed across all of your departments. So you're able to think about, here's the end game, and here's how I'm changing. Here's my delivery. So I'm cross-functional. I'm being agile as an organization, and not just agile as a technological delivery. And it also means that you can give clarity on the roles of people in your organization as to what they're there to do in terms of digital transformation. So the business that didn't do this, it was the same business I mentioned before, 60 brands, 100 countries. They had another problem where they were very much in departmental led, very much waterfall. So here is what we're going to do, and then it trickles through the organization. They were significantly slower than their competitors because they weren't having the right creation process. Managing change centrally. This one speaks for itself, really. Done well, you can have a lot of very good impact very, very quickly, and it's measured in one place. So you're the sum of your parts. Often projects can get stopped because they as a project maybe not returning enough value, but when you interlink them and put them as part of a bigger piece, then you see the value that they are triggering or facilitating elsewhere. They are a catalyst in themselves to deliver value elsewhere. And by the way, these slides are available afterwards, so you're absolutely welcome to look at these. A business that we did do this with, they wanted to, they were a business, a hotelier group turning over 100 million. As little as 3 years later, they'd grown to 750 million. And the heart of this was a centrally planned and coordinated refurbishment program of their entire estate, which they did in 2 years. And it grew rapidly as an organization. Now, they had other problems that they didn't cater with, which we come onto in another scenario. But the reality is that that bit of the project was a huge success. Making the right level of investment, actually the same hotelier, right? So what happened is that whilst this didn't disable the growth, what it did do is make it hugely risky. So looking at right level of investment, we're talking about, sorry, there's a lot of flash going on in the chat. I'm just looking like the connection's unstable. Can you hear me okay now? Can you see the picture okay? I'm just concerned we might have an internet issue. Panelists, are you able to tell me if the things are stable now? Okay, there's a few people on the chat. I apologize, guys. Okay, thank you very much for your quick response there on the chat. When I see it start flashing a lot in the corner, I worry. So, but thank you for that. Okay. So making the right level of investment. This organization had grown hugely, and of course, this rapid revenue growth. But what they hadn't done is they hadn't invested in a core bit of their digital capability. And what was this growth had created a very negative customer experience online. They had a small team, 50% of them were contractors, etc. So what was needed there was a real investment as to de-risk this new revenue they were getting through the digital platform, whilst fundamentally improving customer experience. In this case, they also had outsourced a lot of their functions to third parties that were charging them a fortune. So there was a huge cost saving by bringing people in. And reality is that we grew the team from 6 to 30, but the costs did not go up by 5 times. They only went up by double because we pulled a lot of the resources that were subsequently outsourced. We pulled them in-house, but by de-risking and creating a fantastic customer experience, which has seen the business grow even more. So 2 more to go. Long-term technical plan. Well, clearly this is about having a business-led strategy to deliver technology. What is it you want that technology to do? And here is my plan to deliver it. Now, I'm often asked the question, is business leading technology or technology leading business? Now, historically, if you're going to make money, technology enables that, right? But the reality is the pace and complexity of digital transformation means that it is a two-way street. New tools are coming all of the time that are less likely to be showcased to a chief marketing officer and more likely to be goes, unfortunately, to the CTO today, because it's about technology and it enables something. But technology and business need to continue to work together. So it is a two-way street. So the technical plan is supported by the business, but how you create one is that end of that vision, and that's very much a collaborative process. Business that didn't do this was the same regulated business we mentioned earlier. They had a technical-led platform that didn't meet the market needs. They were creating something that actually ultimately didn't support the business strategy. And the reason it didn't support the strategy because they hadn't defined what that strategy was. So what you've got is 2 things out of sync. And unfortunately for them, they are now bringing it back online, but their business went through a huge amount of change, and they ended up changing the technology 2 times and before finalizing an e-commerce platform. And then finally, the communications plan. And this is really about bringing all of what we've been talking to life. You know, all of these critical success factors can be embedded in the communication. If you think about, if I'm telling a story of an organization, I'm saying this is where we're going, and these are the people in the CXOs that are responsible for them, and we're customer focused, and here we're going to remove all of that legacy and those barriers. I'm communicating all of this strategically. That sets out my stall, right? So if I bring all of that to life, that's me as the central part saying, this is how we make it all happen. And here are the executional factors. Our technical plan looks like this. Our executional, you're all going to be involved. We're going to measure it centrally, and we're going to invest the money. And here's how we're going to invest the money. And we're going to give you extra, maybe we'll backfill your role, maybe we'll bring in new expertise, etc. All of these success factors are part of the communications plan, because you're demonstrating, communicate how you bring this successfully to bear. Great example of this was how a solid communication plan can change the direction of an organization. For those that don't know, MasterCard are a payments network like Visa, and when they floated, the perception was that they were just simply a payments network. And the reality is that they had morphed into so much more that nobody knew. And the CEO went about doing communications internally and externally, sharing his vision and the successes they'd already had, and giving this picture about them as being a fintech company. He did it through town halls, as face-to-face as well as online. But that communications plan fundamentally changed the way that business thinks about itself, because he brought all of these factors together. We've been doing this, we're going to do more of that, etc. Communicating that plan. So those are those factors. Now, we talked about balance, and this is just an illustrative diagram, no particular project. But when you have those clear vision, so you have that leadership, clear vision, your customer experience focused, you're innovative, you're being out, you're bold, and then you have this strategy and insight that says, this is how I'm going to make it happen. I'm insight driven. I'm going to make it happen in these following ways. Those are the driving forces to your digital transformation from a strategic perspective. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And then the execution needs to sit outside of that. It needs to be in balance. It needs to be empowered to, project 2 is product and technology. Project 1 is channels and marketing and customer services. These projects needs to sit with reference to what it is, the big picture you're trying to achieve, measured centrally, coordinated, therefore amplifying the budget, the impact, sorry. So if you don't do it in balance, too much of the central boiling the ocean, one big project trying to change everything. We call this the macro-only approach. I'm doing everything. I'm boiling the ocean. I'm going to change everything. So what happens with these is you're trying to do too much at the same time from a central point. It's also not empowered people. It takes a long time. You see resistance as soon as you bring this change into the organization. They're not part of the transformation. And it stalls and they fail and then they reignite and so on. Similarly, the opposite end is if you don't have a very clear view of what it is you're trying to achieve, that leadership, that vision, you have projects, we call this the micro-only approach. So you've got innovation happening all over the organization. Fantastic. To what end? To what vision? And who's responsible? And we call this the micro-only, which is sort of making it up as you go along. And now there are examples of organizations evolving through luck, mostly, from things starting in one corner of the organization and it takes over, and before you know it, the whole organization is up and running. But that's by luck rather than by judgment. So balance is really, really key. So there's a little exercise at the end of this session that sort of says, the organization you're in today, or perhaps an organization you're studying as part of this program, why don't you think about the success factors and how strong and how directive they are? So, is it done well? Could it be better? Don't have it, or it's very limited. Give yourself a score. You can use red, amber, green. You could use 1 to 5. It's up to you. But ultimately, the stronger the scored area, then that's an area that you have to worry less about. But of course, where you're weak, those things need to be bolstered. And this framework will give you the ultimate chance for success. Now, of course, there are nuances, as we talked about. Each company is different in terms of its appetite to risk, etc. But if you get comfortable and strong on these 9 success factors, you are significantly more likely to execute effectively. And then if you do that, excuse me, if you plot yourself, you can plot yourself on this diagram, right? So you can say, am I strategically strong? Am I an expert? What does that mean? So those words aren't mine, but you can plot yourself onto that diagram and give yourself an understanding of what you need to do to improve. So thank you, that's me. I'm sorry the connection was a little bit unstable. We do have some time, quite a bit of time for questions. Hopefully the chat has now died down and everything is clear. If you do have a question, could I ask you to pop it in the Q&A section and not the chat, because I can't actually see the chat. I do have a question from Eve Abreu. I apologize if I pronounce your name right. Isn't a product service focused organization deserving of a mention here? Absolutely, and product and service follow in exactly the same principle. If you're delivering a service or a product to a customer, then you still need to focus on that experience of how that product is delivered. If it's a physical product, how is it warranted and managed? All of that needs to sit central to what it is you're trying to deliver. So if you're digitally enabling and enhancing a physical product, making sure that that experience is just as good as whether it was a virtual or a manufactured product too. Robert has asked, where can we find the slides? Your course coordinators and panelists will be able to tell you where the slides will be available afterwards. I do pass them to them, and they're made available along with the recording of this session. So I don't have any other questions currently. in the pipeline. Please feel free to ask. We have time. I hope you found it useful. So Robert has asked, can we see what a great vision might look like? I think the challenge there, Robert, is we have done lots of visions. Context is important. So I think the vision needs to encompass three important viewpoints. What does my customer look, when they look at me as an organization, what do they see? What does the company see of its organization in terms of, this will be about data, about information flow, etc. And finally, what does my employees see when they think about me as a business? Do they see a place where it's great to be employed and great to get things done and great for me as an employee because I'm valued and accessible information? Or do they see somebody that's bureaucratic and preventative and archaic? These are the visions which are all digitally enabled that you might view. Unfortunately, a great vision is only a great vision to the business itself. But I can, as long as it articulates those things, and then the final point is the appetite for the vision creation. So when I talk about appetite, what I'm talking about here is financial and risk. What level of risk are they prepared to accept to deliver that vision, and how much is it going to cost? Okay. So Yves also has asked the question, so boiling the ocean doesn't sound like a good strategy. I agree. Is there an area or a clear starting point that tends to make the digital transformation more successful? Absolutely. The most common trigger for a digital transformation is competition, which is sort of too late. So if your competitor is starting to outstrip you in digital engagement, you have two options: catch up and overtake them, or make yourself into a niche that does things differently. That means you can accommodate the physical, and therefore the premium of the physical engagement more effective. So competition is usually the main trigger. Of course, if a business is in financial turmoil because it's failing to compete, then already you're on a back foot. And digital transformation then is about trying to turn the business around and point it back towards profitability. I think opportunity, unfortunately, I'd like to say, so threat is clearly a starting point, competition threat. I would like to think that in an established organization, opportunity would be, but that the human's tendency to change, propensity to change is always going to be resisted. We're creatures of habit. We like the familiar. So if I'm an organization and somebody says, look at the success we could have over here by spending all of this money, that tends to be an individual company to company type opportunity. And those that have the vision to do that are successful. But the vast majority of businesses are triggered by threat, by competition, by something outside of their control, having to adapt to the environment, because they, unfortunately, their board, their management, etc., do not embrace the opportunity that's presented as a combination of the behavioral change. So they wait for disruption. I've got a few more questions coming in. This is great. So Vanina has said, I see the digital transformation is about, of course, a good innovative business model, but is the new digital era bringing a bigger role in marketing? Absolutely. So the more businesses that are digitally connected to the internet, to our social platforms, etc., the busier those environments become. And of course, historically, marketing and advertising has been a very broadcast type solution rather than innovative and engaging. We're starting to see the evolution of traditional channels now becoming innovative and customized. So on TV, you can have telephone numbers relevant to your area rather than national. You've got advertising that incorporates both the TV and your mobile, etc. the area of marketing innovation is a huge environment. In fact, it's a very busy, technologically busy platform and marketplace. What products you can buy, there are 100 different platforms for the same thing nowadays. I think social media in Europe and the West has become a platform for a voice, but I don't think it yet has become a platform for commerce, although that is evolving. Whereas if you go to the Far East, in particular, you go to China, so e-commerce and social media are embedded and intertwined completely. So I think marketing and social media marketing in particular has a huge ongoing impact. So the number of references and influencers on sale are just going to continue to grow. So yes, absolutely. And if you do one thing as an organization, engaging with that digital marketing capability is the first step. Kenny McGregor said there's a lot of high street retailers failing, at least in the UK. I think it's everywhere, Kenny, and not just the UK. How big a part of that do you think is a digital strategy or lack of versus natural selection? I think the UK high street failed to evolve beyond the bricks and mortar. There are lots of instances of bricks and mortar shops and e-commerce coexisting. They tend to be in a niche environment or a specialist environment, but a lot of the high street brands that are well known have not internationalized effectively, not moved into e-commerce. So big international European brands, H&M, Zara, they have very large international footprints and very successful e-commerce businesses. Yet places like, for those that don't know, House of Fraser is folding. We've already lost BHS. We've lost, we lost a lot of high street names, Debenhams. They're all failing because they failed to internationalize their brands and failed to digitally effectively affect a digital strategy. So some of it will be natural selection. There's always going to be a consolidation, but they failed to recognize the threat and respond soon enough, is in short. Retail by nature has been very seasonal, right? So they change the selection of what the products that they offer seasonally. So rather they tend to operate in short cycles in that respect. And I think, but there are some interesting collaborations between big box looking for a TV, etc. This is very much like the US, where there's a lot of purchases online, but those big box retailers have now moved into an online capability, an online environment. So I'm just reading the questions here. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so Pranay Anand has said, often we are engaged with businesses to help them transform digitally. A lot of time is spent dealing with hype versus reality. How do you reset expectation, bringing it back to bite-sized pieces that are more palatable to a business to execute successfully? Well, I think the hype here is we need a bit of hype, right? We need a bit of that. I'm not suggesting that we have to eradicate it, but we have to project further out and say, what is it we're trying to achieve? How brilliant is it going to be when we've done all of this? So we need that big picture. You need to bring that story to life. But then by bringing it back to the reality, as you put it, in the bite-sized chunks, we can say, and here's how we're going to get there. And we're going to start delivering value straight away. But the most important thing is to have a KPI that you're going to measure all of that too. So you say our hyper, the hype, the future world looks like this, and our KPIs are going to look like this, and here's where we are today, and we're going to showcase how we're moving there. And that is more palatable to the business because they can see straight away what it is they're going to get and then start achieving. And you start to build momentum, not only just in momentum of achieving a KPI and moving it forward, but you're also saying people are seeing the evidence quickly. So those bite-sized chunks have got to deliver soon enough to start impacting those KPIs. Now, those KPIs could be, it's up to the board as to what they are. It could be sales volume, it could be margin, it could be, I want to be selling 3 times more telephones than I was a year ago in 5 years. This type of, those visions need to go to that level. They need to go to the KPI level. They need to bring that story to life that says, what does it mean for me, the lowly salesman that sits in the store or sits online managing these product lines? Okay, so I think I've got time for a few more questions. So seeing that the most platforms are light in assets, how do you measure the value in potential worth before the product or service does gain traction? I think maybe a context to your question, but I'll try and think. I'm trying to think about how I've interpreted it. The value of a potential product before it has grown is in about the market share that is attainable. So I was having a conversation with somebody recently about it was actually about the gift card business in the UK and Europe. So gift cards are birthday cards, etc., that I send to people. And actually, they were saying that there are two main players in the UK. Perhaps I'm not sure if they're available in Europe, called Moonpig and Funky Pigeon. So these two platforms exist side by side. And if I was to develop a new platform tomorrow, I can't guess how big that will grow. But what I can do is look at the market as a whole. And so what we were talking about is just how big a market share of those two platforms got and how is the other half served. And if it's served through traditional platforms like stores, then actually there's growth for a new platform. Whether you compete with these two or not is a different question, but you can scale and understand the value of the opportunity. And I think when you're light in assets and the platform therefore doesn't cost a huge amount, there is less risk. So the value potential doesn't need to attain more, but if you're just looking at a market view, you could say, here's the size of the market and here's the opportunity. And that's therefore taking a slice of that. How much do I need to be neutral? How much do I need to break even on my platform? Hopefully that helps answer your question, Wikus. So I have a couple more questions, and I think, I know this one's just saying, are we getting access to the material displayed or just the recording? Actually, that's a good question. I don't know. I know you get the recording, and I am asked for the slides separately, but I don't know how you get to those. So it'd be worth challenging your course coordinator for that. They're definitely available. As an aside, I'm often asked if it's okay to use these slides in presentations. Of course, this is for you guys. Please make sure that it is accredited to Digital Works. This is our work. This is not a methodology out of a book. If it is a book, it's a Digital Works book that's not yet printed. But feel free, just if you give me an email or a message, I'm quite happy to agree to them be used in context of a project that you're doing or some work that you're doing. So I don't have any more questions. Please do fill out the survey, and please let us know what's good and bad. I am chasing up to get the survey results. So if you have a question asked, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to try and answer the question. Thank you, everyone. Panelists, anything you need to add before we cut off? No, maybe not quite. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely weekend, and perhaps we'll meet in the future. Thanks, bye.